Hello guys. The last week of the winter I spent hiking in woods of Delaware Water Gap. I was lucky to explore and document some cool vandal-free abandoned houses. You could see their photos in my Facebook group. Once my wandering led me to discover a unique forgotten farmhouse. That lost in bogs historic homestead has been never filmed, and I decided to tell you its long story. The house is practically all that remains of the village of Brick House, which was demolished to make a way for a bridge across the Delaware River after Second World War. Documentary evidence shows the house was built in the early 1800s by either William Crawford or George Nelden, both of whom were landowners in those distant years. In 1817, William Crawford and his wife May sold 2 parcels of farmland to George Nelden. George, a grandson of a German immigrant, was born in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. His wife Axa, daughter of George Holcomb of Trenton, bore him 2 sons, George and John. The portion at the back of the house is the stone kitchen and smokehouse. They may date from the 1816 to 1836 period in which it was owned by George Nelden, or it may date from the 18th century. Would be good to find any accessible opening to get in and film interior of the house. Okay, that's a perfect way to sneak in. Hope the house wasn't chosen by a random bear as a lair to spend the cold winter in this year. The original kitchen with a beehive oven. At the rear of the kitchen is a smokehouse behind this wall. It has a dirt floor, stone walls, and no ceiling. Not sure about you guys, but I adore smoked meat and fish. My grandpa had a smokehouse when I was as a kid. Smoked salmon and pork belly were delicious. Even this memory makes me hungry. When I came across old stoves in abandoned houses, I always try to find any labels on bricks. It may help accurately date the house. Well, no any visible notes at beams and labels on bricks. But go to check the house and I will tell you its further story. I see now that the property evidently survived the fire. However, the damaged walls are still covered multiple layer of wallpaper. Linoleum floor applied over wood floorboards. After Nelden died in 1836, the property passed to his sons. The youngest son of George, John Holcomb Nelden, graduated from Union College, New York. He worked at this farm for over 20 years. He married Susan Maria Roebuck Nelden, who bore him 9 children. They all used to live in this house. The oldest son, George Holcomb, received his early education in common school at Montague. Between 1829 and 1839, he carried on a general mercantile business and learnt legal studies in a law office in New York. In the beginning of 1840s, George ran a business associated with import of china, glass, and earthenware. As well, according to unconfirmed source, he was a clerk for 4 years in Sussex Railroad Company. In 1846, he returned to Montague, where, with partnership with his brother John, he carried on 5 years a general mercantile business, farming, lumbering. In 1849, George Nelden was elected sheriff of Sussex County and held the office for usual term of 3 years. During the Civil War, he assisted the government in gathering recruits for the Union Army. Later, he opened a coal and lumber yard in Newton, which he operated until 1874. In that year, he was elected County Clerk of Sussex and held this office until his death in 1881. I was lucky to find George's biography, but I will not focus on it too much. If you're interested, you can find the link to it and other historical references in the description to the video. Last occupants moved out in 1960s, and this children's room was deserted. I would like to believe that an old man or a woman lives somewhere, and this room, decorated with the fancy wallpaper, is still alive in their memories. The Nelden brothers owned the farm jointly until 1843. In that year, George, who was residing in New York City, sold his part of the property to his brother John. John Nelden and his wife Susan lived at the farmstead for another 17 years. In 1860, they sold the farm to George Hornbeck and became a lumber merchant in Newton. The Hornbeck family was one of the pioneer families of Sussex County. This part of the house was built in 1860s, I think, under George Hornbeck ownership. In 1903, George died, and his surviving heirs sold the property to his son, Joseph Hornbeck. These old, strange pictures look pretty disturbing. Would like to know what was going on here. Despite the room looks quite cozy, I wouldn't be happy to be here at night. Although, if you guys are interested in night creepy explorations, let me know. Last days I'm thinking how to spend the summer, and what kind of places to explore. Abandoned mines, cemeteries, historic houses, or just forgotten industrial objects. I have at least 100 abandoned sites in my records to show you. The summer promises to be interesting. Sorry, I've strayed from the topic. Joseph's tenure was short-lived. He died intestate on December 1907. His wife, Emma Hornbeck, continued to live in this house until her death. The property was inherited by her daughter, Bertha Cole. Bertha Cole died in 1944, and the farmstead passed to her daughter, Mabel Roberts, as the only surviving heir. I see a lot happened in these deserted rooms. So many people dead here. I believe Mabel Roberts may have rented out the house between 1944 and 1968. In 1968, she sold the house to the United States government to make a way for a new dam. Taking pictures of any old artifacts may help recreate chronology of events and say a couple of words about people who lived here. However, in this case, this perfume bottle is hardly related to the history of this abandoned house. Probably somebody dropped it here in 90s. Nice to see the biggest part of building doesn't have roof leakages. The house still has a chance to be saved. Let's check out the basement. Detailed tract and topography maps drawn by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers show the property as it existed in the mid-1960s. The house has remained abandoned since the early 1970s. An historical architectural survey of Delaware Water Gap, this place is marked as the Nelden Hornbeck Farm, formerly the Roberts Farm. By the way, when I was exploring this farmstead, I didn't know some interesting facts. For example, it's surrounded with abandoned orchard. This orchard contains one of the largest and possibly oldest apple trees in the National Park Service. Its 2004 estimate was that this tree may have been 160 years old. As well, there's a pretty nice ice house, totally hidden in the overgrown remains of the orchard.